Greetings, everyone. It is an edition of Content Evolution New World. Mike McGuire, my co-host, is with me. Delighted to see you, Mike. It's July 27th, and we're really happy to have Jemay Bliven with us, the newly minted author of a book that we're going to hear all about. Mike, where do we find you? You're in your lair.
Back in my lair in Redwood City, yeah. Just
Good morning there, Mike.
Top of the morning. Hey, Bruce.
And for those of you who joined the Content Evolution gathering out on the West Coast at the top of the Marriott, thanks for coming out. Mike, thanks for coming out. Mark Prinsky, really appreciate you being part of that. So, Jemay, right?
Morning.
I am glad that we're getting you, in the early days of distribution of your new book. All right, hold it up. Hold it up. It's upside.
Here it
The
is.
status, right? And
Status.
reversing discrimination, reversing degrees of discrimination.
Yes.
Okay, that's a provocative title. All right. What do you let's just you're going to unpack this, because I was telling people as we were gathering, my copy of the book arrives tomorrow. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. All right, so you're going to unpack the big stuff right for us. Subtitle. What does that subtitle mean, Jemay?
So the book is about the 16 years, really 20 years, if you go back to my North Carolina days, of really the research behind degrees being required in jobs. And
so that's what you mean by degrees. Okay.
Reversing degrees of discrimination. So it's a play on degrees, but yes, it is about the degree, specifically more the 4-year degree. I'm a big advocate for the community college system because it's easier for the average person to get through, and they're working really hard on shortening time to higher ed. In fact, I'll just throw in that HR executive, I just posted that for the first time ever, credentials have passed degrees. The number of people getting credentials, and we do have that research in the book. We identified that about 6 months ago, but HR executive just released that. So shorter term is the key to success.
Yeah, it makes sense. So as you mentioned, it used to be a neighbor, and I didn't know you as well when you were right here, but I've gotten to know you really good. All right. So
I know. I wish we would have
Santa
known
Fe.
Yeah.
And I knew the organization that you were part of, which is now known as the North Carolina Technology Association.
Right.
And it's I think that this is a very long-term perspective that you've incubated here. You've had a lot of conferences about new ways to think about education, and I'm glad that I was one of the voices to help you say, well, everything you need to get it out of your head and onto paper, right? And
yes, you were
delighted to see that.
You were an inspiration to get me to the finish line. I will say that.
Yeah.
And at the front of this, I wanted to say thank you for buying my book, because all proceeds go back to Innovate to Educate for scholarships. I just want to get that out, that the all proceeds go back to my nonprofit that will provide direct skill scholarships to those looking for
that's interesting, but some people don't know Innovate Educate. So what is the mission?
Innovate Educate, and it's in my book, the journey is in the book. In fact, it's a story about Erskine Bowles and how I decided, okay, I was with Erskine in a group, which is where I met my researcher who's in the book throughout. But Innovate Educate, when I moved to New Mexico, because my husband got an opportunity to start a venture fund, I just thought, I'm going to start a nonprofit that really brings an industry voice and focuses on skills. And so, started that nonprofit April of 2008, and, been building it ever since. We had some big years. I think our highest revenue was over 5 million. And now I would say we're a boutique consulting firm, nonprofit, really working specifically with employers and regions and communities to try to shift those hiring strategies.
Mhm.
So demand driven.
So all the proceeds of the book are going to that mission.
That's right. That's
Okay,
right.
that's good. And I'm interested because you're a new author, and some people have ambitions, right, to be an author, right? So in addition to the actual content of the book, right, and we have some serial authors on the call who have multiple titles under their belt, right, and then we have others who are more, thinking. Your journey was, as an observer, was enthusiasm that then had moments of despair, right?
Yeah.
That,
Yes.
that you couldn't focus on. It wasn't you're a good writer, right? But the fact is that there were just moments that you could not muster the time that you wanted to. And then eventually you just pushed yourself. I saw that,
Yeah.
right?
I did.
And I would say that the process was very intermittent, right? Did you ever get to a flow state? Did you ever get to the point where you say, this is all coming together? When did that happen for you?
That happened when I was lucky enough. I wrote it over a couple of years, starting during COVID, but then I just, I'm not a sitter. I don't sit very well.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
I was like, how am I going to do this? But I was shocked. I went to Costa Rica last January I didn't have a goal. I was going to finish the book. So I stayed 6 weeks by myself with my dog, which was amazing. And I wrote every day. And I was really shocked how much I had written. But it was a matter of laying it out all over the floor and trying to really put my head around which chapter goes where. And I worked about 6 hours a day for 6 weeks and was really methodical. I put myself on I didn't get to go walk on the beach with my dog unless I had written for 4 hours minimum. Like I scolded myself if I didn't do something. So it worked out. It worked out.
Okay, so, well, I think that all the pieces were there. And as you said, you found a moment to organize it and get the arc of the book, right, to happen. Because you set that time aside. So that's good. I think that's.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to have a side conversation with you because I have personal things in there, starting with my own personal journey and my grandfather who never finished 8th grade. And so I throw in little things and may really seem goofy to the reader. I still like what I wrote, which is probably good because most people go, oh my God, I can't believe I wrote that. I love Anne Lamott. And I love Bird by Bird. And I listened to it again while I was in Costa Rica because she's one of my favorite authors. But, I just like to share some of my own personal stories too. So I've got a few of those in there.
That's good. Well, I mean, you're always encouraged to write something about something you know about, right? Personal stories are clearly something you know about. So let's go back to, the core topic, so the ongoing decomposition of how we learn is happening as we speak, right? The traditional idea of the entire universe of ideas being available in a university, right, is it's still a typology that is good for certain kinds of activities. However, the the new things are coming in with the credentials, the expansion of opportunity with the community and technical college system, that's actually a very robust footprint, right? Where do you, in your book, where do you see this going? All right, what if the credentials, as you said, just overcame traditional degree granting and microcredits versus the larger units of traditional college credits?
Right.
It seems to be atomizing, right? Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I was looking at the chapter titles. There's 11 chapters, followed by part 2, which thank you, Kevin, for writing one of the essays on the future of work. I have 10 essays on the future of work, and you were one of the authors, so thank you for that. I kind of break it down to the first chapter: is requiring a degree really discriminatory? And I just call it out, and I put the data out there. I believe it is. Chapter 6 is a EEOC asleep at the wheel. That's pretty strong. Sorry, EEOC, but I do say they're asleep at the wheel. Because, years ago, I think in the book I talk about 1970, they said requiring the high school degree was discriminatory in a job posting. So if that's discriminatory, well, you definitely think that if 80% of African Americans and 70% of rural America does not have a degree, then a job posting that requires a degree other than something for an engineer, doctor, something that's really required, is discriminatory. So I think the book breaks down data, my own opinions, answers to what if the system looked like this? What if we broke things down smaller? So I talk about some of the things happening, and try to provide some solutions. I really try to focus on the data. And then there is one chapter that when you say, what else can we do? One chapter focuses on what governors are doing. So I highlight Arkansas, Colorado, Ohio, Maryland. And the governors, NGA is starting to really pull together all the governors. Most of them have dropped the requirements to skills in all state jobs. And I talk about the OPM, Office of Personal Management, federally has dropped all degrees in federal jobs. The problem is nobody knows how to assess for skills, or if they do, they aren't. So the system's going to break down if we don't figure out methodologies for assessing. And that's tough because employers are afraid to assess because they got sued, right? So, I think, yes, we're getting a lot of progress in talking about it, but I say walk the walk versus talk the talk is one of the chapters. And that is who's actually walking it versus talking it. Very few employers outside of CSR, customer service, umbrellas, CSR, client service, very corporate, what is corporate service? Anyway, very few are actually implementing in their HR.
Okay, so a few years ago, I took a retreat with some other people to Oaxaca, Mexico. And as a result, I recognized that this is a relatively impoverished part of Mexico. And there wasn't access to, learning the way that we would understand it, past a certain level. And everyone that was doing professional jobs, like being a lawyer, learned to become a lawyer through apprenticeship, right? Yeah. They would apprentice themselves to a lawyer. They would take that on for about a decade, and then they would have sufficient knowledge to be able to go and take the Mexican bar exam, right? Without ever going to school. They just, learned by doing, right? And by, being mentored by somebody who's in the profession. So I ask you, where does that come? I mean, you see that in guilds, all right? In Europe, where does that fall into the spectrum of opportunities, that you examined?
Yeah, Ben, I see your note here. So I talk about this in the book. Right now, I don't, the accredited institutions in higher education, the lobbying for higher education and the publishing industry for higher, it's huge. And I don't really see how we're going to break that down. I mean, that's the problem, is that our government is so heavily invested into higher education. I mean, some of these community colleges have way more employees than students, right? I mean, that's why they're going under. It's a huge business. And I talk about the GI Bill and how higher education got started in the first place. It's fascinating what the GI Bill really did for our country. But then it became a big business. And people are not going to back down. So I don't see guilds, and I don't see a breakdown of the four-year institution. And I'm not saying I support the breakdown of the four-year institution. I talk about my own children and the debt it costs to get them through. But I do know from the data that there will not be an increase in our country of people that can get a higher education degree. So if we're only going to have 30% of our country with a degree ever, or 35%, then we're going to have to change the hiring system. So I'm not trying to fix the education system. I tried that. That's like, I mean, that's, I talk about how angry people were, but I do think employers have to shift, and I call out discrimination so that they get scared.
Okay.
Yes, I think I saw a question.
Yeah, well, we're going to be going to questions in just a moment. And I just want to make sure that, did we leave anything out in terms of unpacking the premise of the book, the core theory of change, Jemay? I think that you just nailed it, right? Which is, this is not about changing education. This is changing, how do you look at the credentials for employment?
That's right.
And if you have the skills to do the job, is it, eliminate the barriers from people who are qualified but don't necessarily fit the definition, all right, of the way that we've hired in the past. Is that true?
100%. And I would surmise, and I don't know exactly, but I know enough about the employment market. If you don't have any degree right now, or any 2-year or higher, most likely, unless you know someone, which is the best thing, is knowing someone that knows someone. That's how most people get a job.
Yeah.
If you don't, you're most likely going to get hired into restaurant, hospitality, or retail, which is not a living wage.
Yeah.
And then you can't get promoted because you don't have a degree. Lockheed Martin, when I worked with them, I worked with the top executives that said, we have so many smart secretaries, but they could never get promoted because they don't have a degree.
Okay. So my last story is that 50 years ago, almost 50 years ago, as I was getting ready to go to college, I knew what degree program I wanted to be in. I wanted to be in an advertising public relations. And there were only a handful of schools that offered both as a combined degree. So that narrowed my choice set. And I went and asked people who are actually in the profession, which school would you go to? And they said, we don't care. We have no interest in your degree, all right? In our world, you better come with a portfolio that shows us that you can do the work. So what I gravitated toward was a school that had a lot of internship opportunities, so I could build the portfolio, all right? And if I hadn't asked those questions, it would have been a different outcome. But I ended up being a VP of a small ad PR firm coming out of college, and that was a good credential to have, right?
And your father was an executive with IBM, right?
Yeah.
You understood navigation. Most people, especially the people that I work with, they don't. Their parents have been laborers, agriculture, masonry. They can help their kids understand what that means. So, and that's 80% of our country. So, and now, Lord, there's so many different jobs. Nobody even knows how to navigate what jobs there are, right?
That's right. All right, so we're going to jump into questions, and I saw Andrea had her hand up first. So Andrea, we're glad you're here.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Interesting topic. So just wanted to convey a story. So I did consulting a few years back with a company, ACT, makes the ACT
test. I know ACT
and they have all sorts of certifications that they have when people get out of technical schools and certify if you're qualified for the job. You have to score above like a 4 or 5 out of 5 to get certified. And while I was there, the concept came up is, could we use this for selection tests for companies who wanted to hire people? And I did some work. The companies were very interested. ACT actually created a division that would work with these organizations, provide these selection tests of people who didn't have college degrees, but came in with skills, could take a test, get certification about their knowledge. And it was going very well until ACT got another CEO, and he decided that he didn't want to do that anymore because it was like their core business was working with academia, and this was kind of demeaning to their ACT brand, and closed the division down, fired my friend who was the CEO of that division. So there have been attempts to do what you said. I know the snobbery of ACT, which is, by the way, a non-for-profit. It's a large corporate. We think it's a corporation, but it's over $1 billion in revenue. But they closed down the division, and it was working well.
I know all about it. And I knew Martin Scaglione, and I knew Martin Riorda, and I know.
And Brian Mock was the head of
Brian Mock is a dear friend. He's amazing. Oh yeah, Brian's a dear friend. I know all
Kevin,
about.
You know Brian from IBM.
Yeah,
and it was so frustrating.
This is my grandbaby. This is the next grandbaby. So we are multitasking, as Kevin knows that I'm really good at. ACT had an amazing assessment portfolio. Unfortunately, it was 10% of their revenue, and the ACT college assessment was 90% of their revenue, and they threw away that opportunity. I've tried to reach out to Janet. I think it's Janet, the new CEO, multiple times, but I think they threw that baby out with the bathwater. So
exactly.
It's unfortunate because they had lots of contracts with workforce boards, and still do. They still have ACT work keys, which is a very awesome validated assessment. But totally agree with you. Totally agree. If anybody was doing a good job, it was them.
Yep. I remember that, I had almost a year's worth of tuition that I didn't have to pay for my first year of school because I took college level examination placement tests and didn't have to take those courses because they said, "Oh, you're proficient," right? But and those weren't, they're no grades. It just, it was a pass fail, credit against your degree, but I was able to get through the degree in 3 years instead of 4 because of the, opportunity to do that. All right. And so that's another, tip of the hat to the credentialing, Jemay.
I agree.
So what credentials does that grandchild already have, in your opinion?
Well, one of my chapters talks about learning how to learn. The number one skill is learning how to learn. And if you can't learn how to learn now, and ACT measured learning how to learn, they actually have an assessment for that. And I talk about that because that is a skill that you have to have on the job. And there are measurements on learning how to learn. And, I think that's key to the progressiveness of of our own economy is being able to have these critical thinkers and know how to learn. So that's what I would say. She's pretty freaking smart. She just got
Yeah,
to.
I bet she is, right?
So,
Now,
I mean, as a matter of, I do think that to make this a reputable recording, I probably should give this maybe 5 more minutes before we fall apart.
I'm sorry.
We probably should give this about 5 more minutes before we don't have a good recording.
Oh, well, I mean, we're going to go for the hour, but you can, it's good so far. And I want to jump in to, there's another, a couple of people that I know have an interest in this. Ben, you've been posting, and I know Mark Prinsky probably has some thoughts because he's navigating an adjacent space. Ben, your thoughts?
Hey, Jemai, I just ordered the book, so we'll.
Thank you.
I look forward to receiving that. But understand, I'm coming from the dark side. I'm on the faculty at the Gosueta Business School at Emory University. I've been in academia my entire life, but I wholeheartedly agree with. I 87% agree with 92% of what you say, and that's better. That's better than my agreement with Mark, by the way.
Yeah, back and forth that I see
Yeah.
on everything.
No,
and
but
I do know Gary Bowles, by the way, Doug. I do know Gary
Yeah.
Bowles. Yep.
my comment would be that there needs to be a credentialing structure that replaces it. I know Mark would like to perceive that some record of accomplishments is sufficient. I need some indication of skills and capabilities and abilities. And the problem to me with the degree structure is it makes too many assumptions about what your life is going to be, whatever your profession. And it narrows guardrails that makes assumptions about what career and profession are. And I don't think it holds, especially for late millennials and Gen Z, who know that their portfolio of experiences, not necessarily accomplishments, asserted accomplishments, and I referenced George Santos to Mark in doing that. That
So,
there, one quick thing. I have a I have a niece who told me that she was going to sell. She was in Arizona, going to sell her car and go to New York and make it in the movies. Now, when your niece tells you that, you start to say your first notion is wait a minute, Anna, wait a minute, and yet she did it, and she did it. She did not. She had a degree in furniture design and computing, and she's gotten Directors Guild awards and works with Rami Malek and Wes Anderson and all these people on set design. And she has no degree in those domains, but she has a portfolio of capabilities,
Right.
and she shaped her own job. And that's what's happening.
I mean,
The people that
that's
are
right.
successful now are shaping their own.
That is what I think it takes. And, the other thing that the book talks about, my husband has a call too, so this is the problem.
You're in the hall.
The other thing,
You had to move your location?
What?
You had to move your location?
Yes.
Happens in my house all the time too.
So the other thing that we talk about is that very few people have 4 years of time and 4 years of money. So the problem with higher education, oh boy, okay, I'm sorry. Say hi. So the problem with the 4-year degree is it takes too long. And it takes so long because you have to take English and math and world literature and PE and 4 languages. And, some of that is a huge problem. And I think we could somehow change that possibly.
All right, that's good.
Uh,
Well, let me tell you what I'm going to do, Jemay. I'm going
quick.
to stop the recording in a second, all right, because this is a good, and then I'm going to restart it, all right, I'll send 2 links, all right, so that you have a short version for your use. And we're delighted that you could be with us to share
Perfect.
Upside, the new book by Jemay Bliven with us. So order it. It's great. Stand by.